Hello again and welcome to my channel. I thought that it would be good to address some of the current events going on right now in this country, in the United States, especially regarding the debate over abortion and abortion rights. With the recent leak of the Supreme Court opinion that indicates that they are likely going to be overturning Roe versus Wade. Obviously, this is something that has once again been thrust into the forefront of everyone's attention. Um, Now, I'm not really interested in the political debate, and that's no doubt something that has quite a lot to do with my own Mennonite background and my Mennonite beliefs and traditions. To me, the political discussions aren't really very interesting even. While obviously the political decisions happening in the government do have real and measurable effects on people's lives, I think that they really are secondary to the much more important philosophical debates going on well beneath the surface. So really, I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of step back and look at the idea of abortion itself and kind of stay out of the debate as to whether or not the government should or should not make certain decisions or impose certain restrictions and so on. You really wind up with something of an unsolvable dilemma when you're operating at only the surface level of things. I think we need to have something of a deeper understanding of our own motivations before we can actually look at a topic as divisive as this one, honestly. Like so many topics, this one very quickly gets divided into two extreme camps. And it seems that very often, once you start to lean toward one position or the other, you really get sucked down into things so far, you kind of lose sight of reality. So I want to be careful here because I do kind of want to speak to both sides of the issue at least a little bit. Now, it probably seems very obvious to just about everyone that has an opinion on the topic that it is something that's very cut and dry. It's very straightforward what is right, what is wrong, and so on. Now, obviously, as a Mennonite with generally very conservative Christian principles, I will fall pretty squarely on the anti abortion side of this debate. So you would expect there to be quite a few things that will go along with that. When dealing with this topic in particular, though, I think we really do have to step back from the issue itself a bit and try to have a look at what is really going on. Maybe that'll make sense. I hope that'll make sense at least. I don't really think that we can get much of anywhere by dealing with this topic directly because whatever view we have or whatever position we take really comes from something more fundamental to our belief system than just what is on the surface. I think this is a huge error that people tend to make when addressing things like abortion or homosexuality, transgenderism, whatever other hot button social topic you choose. You'll notice very often that there is this sort of consistency as to how people will line up on these issues, and there is a very good reason for that. I don't think that it's simply a matter that you will accept completely whatever your side chooses to stand on. Rather, I think that a person or a group of people um, will adopt certain basic core beliefs or philosophies, and then all of these other things will naturally extend outward from this very simple core. So what am I trying to say? I think it's something like what really lies at the heart of this debate and really at all of our debates is a very simple idea. There are a few basic ideas that we can adopt, which we will then sort of use as the lens through which we see and interpret everything going on around us. If I adopt, for example, this basic Christian principle that Christ is the Logos, the Word of God, and that He's the pattern for everything, this really simple idea will fundamentally change and inform the way I understand everything going on around me, the whole world and everything. So naturally, if I actually believe that and try to apply it consistently, there is going to be a certain definite set of beliefs and principles and values that follow from that. Hopefully that kind of makes sense and frames, I guess, the whole basic argument. The problem I see so many Christians make is that we try to convert everybody and to impose these more external applications of the basic Christian principles. So we try to impose Christian values onto I guess you could say, a substrate of secular philosophy, and that doesn't work. So, for example, our understanding of things leads us to conclude that the killing of babies is wrong. So naturally, we need to stand up for that and do everything we can to stop it. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but what I am trying to say is that you're not going to convert anyone to your way of thinking if you're always dealing with these external things only. And this really is why this debate can't ever be settled. Now, of course, the opposite is also true. Those who support abortion do so because this is the conclusion that their own basic beliefs demands. It's not simply a matter of they're wicked and evil people who want to kill babies or anything like that. There is something that lies at the heart of it, and that might raise the question, or answer the question rather, of why is it that seemingly good people can support something that to us seems so evil? So what I see is something like this. Abortion really is the natural conclusion of humanism and the elevation of the individual that occurs in post-Enlightenment society. It's also the natural consequence of materialism. And here I'm talking about materialism in the philosophical sense, which is the belief that nothing is real or nothing exists aside from, you could say, from that which can be observed and measured. Nothing is real except for matter and its movements and so on. This really is the doctrine that lies at the core of modern thought, even within much of Christianity, unfortunately. And if we look into this, we can really start to understand why people would be in support of abortion without being just maniacally evil people. So I'm directing this part at least toward the Christian. You have to understand why your opponent has the beliefs he does if you're actually going to have this discussion. And it seems to me that we're generally unaware of the deeper lying issue. There's the way that we tend to fall into the dangers of materialisms in this way ourselves, and that we only see what's right in front of us, what's obvious, what's right on the surface. That being said, of course, I think abortion is, in the overwhelming majority of circumstances at least, an inexcusable evil. But this isn't something that is rooted solely in the virtue of the thing itself. What's even more important for us to understand is that it's really rooted in something that's absolutely despicable. It has at its core the terrible philosophies that define the modern age. All you have to do to understand this is look at the way people talk about it and what their reasons and justifications are. A lot of times it comes down to basically a recognition of the inconvenience and the hardship that carrying the child to term would put on the woman, or the way in which this will interfere with her plans, and so on. It might not be immediately obvious, but the philosophies behind the other defenses of the practice are really much the same. I think you can argue that this can be extended all the way to cases of rape and incest, which seems to be the line even most conservatives and Christians are not willing to cross. But then along with this, also you have to understand the basic beliefs and philosophies that lie at the core of this. The people that believe this is all that they've ever known, all that they've ever understood. You should recognize that it's wrong, but you can't exactly just dismiss them and condemn them for having this because they don't know anything else. And that might be because we as Christians have really failed in representing the alternative in a meaningful or a compelling way. I think it's always much more useful for us to take the burden and the blame upon ourselves rather than to dismiss and condemn everybody else. You could say that's essentially what Jesus does on the cross, is to take the burden upon himself rather than just judge and condemn us. So I guess getting back to the topic, what then actually is the problem? The problem lies in the things that we as a culture and society value today. We are again materialists, which means that ultimately the only thing that matters is what we can acquire and accomplish in this life, in terms of financial success, fame, power, and so on. It should be pretty obvious how having to carry a baby to term and even raise it will interfere with these things. Even those who oppose abortion often have a very similar philosophy. Counter arguments wind up being something like, well, having a child and a family is really a better accomplishment than having a career or something along those lines. But you really do have to understand how this argument falls flat and why. Those who support the practice are obsessed with the sovereignty of the individual, and this is really their highest value. Anything that interferes with an individual's sense of freedom, of independence, that gets in the way of their goals is the highest of evils. This is the consequence of a belief system that really does elevate the individual to the highest position. This really is the natural consequence of this Enlightenment philosophy that we in the West have adopted so completely. And there's really no end to the terror of this sort of belief system. This is why the debate seems to often come down to, at what point is the fetus considered to be a person? Because the only standard we seem to be able to agree on, at least for the moment, is that the only limit to an individual's freedom is that it can't impose itself or interfere with another person's freedom. So then, if you can demonstrate that at this point the child is now a person, then you no longer have the right to interfere with that person's rights and freedoms. However, this really is a very terrible idea, because one of the fundamental concepts of any cooperative effort, and especially of a functioning society, is that we collectively have to sacrifice a certain amount of our freedom and individuality for the good of the whole, which means that we're ultimately not individuals. We're ultimately not sovereign. We're ultimately not completely free. And this is really actually quite interesting, because this sort of absolute individualism does have this tendency to devolve into like this sort of extreme tyrannical version of that, which is like this extreme statism where the individual is basically erased, and the only thing that matters then is the state itself. So everybody exists in service of the state. Now, of course, as Christians, we should understand perfectly why this is the case, why it happens this way. Because this is what demonic ideas tend to do. They get you to love and to worship yourself, and then they get you to put yourself in front of others, and even to sacrifice others in a way for your own benefit. This, you could say, is the story of Cain. Cain is self-serving, and since his self-serving nature falls short, he then has to sacrifice Abel, you could say, as one way of looking at that story. This sort of individualism can only descend toward violent chaos, because it has rejected the idea that there is anything at all above it that's holding everything together. You could say that man is his own God, and that really does seem to be the case a lot of the time. But the problem ultimately is that this is actually not true. A man certainly thinks he's his own God, but in reality, he's just been tricked into thinking this by something else. We reject this idea that there is a God above us that we need to be in subjection to, because we don't want to think of ourselves as being in subjection to something. That to us seems like the greatest evil and tyranny. We want to be free. We like to think of ourselves as being free and as being a sovereign people. So we adopt all of these beliefs and ideas that seem to tell us that this is the case. But what we don't realize, again, is that we've been tricked. At the end of the day, it turns out that we're really not in charge. We're really not free. We're not sovereign. We're not even individuals. We're really not independent at all. We've been tricked and fooled into giving everything up, in this case, even our children, in service to these demonic forces. So you can kind of see how this works just by looking at what's obvious in front of us. How many people wind up becoming completely enslaved by their careers or by their businesses or something like that, these things that they've sought after in order to serve themselves, and then they end up serving them instead. How many people get completely bound up and subjected to political activism? I think we can come up with 1,000 other examples of how this works without really even having to try it all. So you can see how it really winds up working out this way, pretty much always. So looking back at abortion, we start to see what's actually going on. This might start to sound a little crazy to some of you, but really it is in the end just another form of human sacrifice. You only think you're ending a pregnancy because it's inconvenient, or because it interferes with your plans, or because it gets in the way of your goal or your calling, and so on. And I think that those who do this genuinely do think that they're doing what's best, but this is because they are so wrapped up in this whole view and understanding of things that makes this look like it's really the only reasonable conclusion to their problem, might say. And this is where things actually start to get really, really scary. None of this is what you're actually doing. Again, I said they think that they're ending a pregnancy, but what they're actually doing is sacrificing a human. This thing and the 1,000 other things that are like it, in the way that they're serving the same basic idea, never actually can deliver what they've promised. And this is exactly what idols do, what demons do. Think of this idea that you have in early Christianity and in the Bible, that the pagans are sacrificing to dead gods, because that's exactly what we're doing. These gods are not dead in the sense that they're not real, because all of the gods actually are very real, and that's the whole problem. They're dead in the sense that they can't actually give you the things that they promise. What these demonic spirits have to offer is really, really enticing, and that's precisely why we listen to them. And this isn't just true of those on the extreme on the other side. This really applies to all of us in a lot of ways. Indeed, it's in the end, it can actually start to be hard to blame people for making some of the decisions that they do, even when they are so clearly evil, because they've been so thoroughly duped into thinking this is actually a good and noble thing, and they genuinely can't see otherwise. So what do we do about this? This really is a hard and a difficult question, because we've certainly got our work cut out for us. The whole problem is that we really have to uproot the whole worldview that stands behind it. And I think the best thing we can actually do in this regard is just to expose it for what it is. Point out the obvious, that these things never give you what they promise, and in the end you're just going to be bitter and miserable and hate everything, and you really want to keep going down that road. We've got to help people understand that there really is something higher, something above the whole system and above us, and that nothing's ever going to work unless we acknowledge that inescapable fact. Whether or not you want that to be the case is really, in the end, completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because things are what they are. The world is what it is, and you can't escape from reality. Which, again, this seems to be the whole problem with our modern world, is that we ultimately want to escape reality. So what we've got to do instead is to point people back to God. I think that's probably a good place to end. I could keep going on about this subject, but I do think it's best probably to keep it brief. I have left a lot up, I know, for question, for thought, and I guess it's kind of the point. I'm not trying to answer all of your questions to solve all of the world's problems, because I can't do that. Instead, again, the goal in this video and in all of our videos and all that we do here is to point people to God as having the answers. If you did enjoy this video, I would very much appreciate it if you would leave a like, leave your comments also below. And if you disagree, I would certainly love to hear your thoughts. I would love to be challenged. Maybe there's something that I haven't failed to consider. Don't be afraid to comment either for or against. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Share this video with your friends and so on. Thanks again for tuning in, and God bless.